My first date, submitted by Sweet Guy 27. I was a very lonely child growing up. I had no brothers or sisters, no friends, and no pets. My parents were very careful to keep me away from anyone, it seemed. I found myself grounded on several occasions, even though I thought myself to be a pretty good kid. I was homeschooled and did very well in all my studies. I began to draw at a very young age, and I would spend hours in my room with a pencil and a stack of drawing paper. I'd always had a fascination with girls. There was no way that I could bring myself to talk to any of them. I would see a pretty girl at the grocery store or the library, and more than anything, I'd want to approach her, but my lack of human interaction wouldn't allow me to. I was 15 years old when my parents bought me my first computer to help with my learning. I would spend hours in chat rooms after my parents went to bed for the night. I felt as though I was finally learning how to interact with people, especially girls. This went on for months, and I enjoyed it, but it was still nothing more than just an online fantasy, until I met Katie. I began chatting with Katie just before I turned 16. Talking to Katie was the closest I had been to talking to a girl in real life, because she lived in the next town over. We were both the same age. We had a lot in common. Her parents were also very strict, but they at least allowed Katie to go to school. She was very shy, and she was a victim of bullying by the popular girls, as she called them. We chatted online for weeks before she decided to send me a picture of herself. She seemed to be an average girl, average height, weight, but I found her to be the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. It took some convincing, but Katie was able to talk me into sending her a picture of myself as well. I was the happiest person in the world when she told me that she thought I was cute. One day, while we were chatting, Katie mentioned that her parents would be out of town for the weekend and that she wanted to hang out with me. The plan was for us to meet at a somewhat busy park that was about halfway between the two of us, and then go back to her house from there. She had heard stories about psychos posing as regular people on the internet and then stalking their victims. I assured her that I was the real deal, but I understood her concerns and agreed to the date. I was unsure how I would slip the grasps of my parents, but I didn't care. This was going to happen. I snuck out of the house after telling my parents that I was going to bed because I didn't feel well. I knew that I would be long gone by the time they checked on me, and there was nothing that they could do about it then. I deleted all traces of Katie from my computer before I left, so even if they could find out that I was gone, they weren't going to be able to track me. I made it to the park rather early and sat down on the memorial bench that we had agreed as our meeting spot. I was the most nervous that I have ever been in my entire life. I had so many things going through my mind. Is she gonna like me? Can I actually go through with this? All of those thoughts disappeared the moment I saw her. Katie's face appeared from behind a group of people. She waved as she made her way through the crowd. Surprisingly, I found it very easy to talk to Katie. It was as if we were still behind our keyboards. The words just flew out of my mouth, and the nervousness completely disappeared. It seemed like we were talking forever, and the time just flew by. We probably would have talked longer if the sun hadn't begun to go down. We decided that we'd better start our walk to her house before it got too late. After a few blocks, Katie mentioned that she thought that we were being followed. She had noticed a man continually glancing at us. We turned the next corner, and then so did he. This went on for 2 more blocks, and finally I grabbed Katie by the arm, pinned her against the building, and kissed her as deeply and as passionately as a virgin kisser could. I heard the man's footsteps grow closer, then fade away. I pulled my lips away from hers and looked into the direction that the man was walking. I guess he wasn't following us after all. I turned and looked back at Katie when she hadn't answered me. She was staring at me with a slight grin that told me she had really enjoyed what just happened. When we got back to Katie's house, she offered me a drink and showed me her bedroom where her computer was. We went through all of our old conversations that we had over the last few months. She stopped and shot a smile at me and said she would be right back. She wanted to get into something more comfortable as she got up and walked out of the room. I paced back and forth in her bedroom. Is this really happening? Is it finally my time? Questions like these were running through my head. I was more excited than nervous, though I knew that this is exactly where I wanted to be. I knew that I wanted Katie to be my first. Katie announced her return as I was watching the street outside of her bedroom window. I noticed a man walking on the sidewalk in front of Katie's house, and I pulled the blinds closed. I turned and faced Katie, who was now wearing a cute pink pajama set. Beautiful, I heard myself mutter. Katie blushed and smiled wildly. I walked toward her and gently placed my hands on her neck and pulled her toward me. I watched the twinkle in her eyes disappear as I clenched my hands together and tighter around her throat. There was a mix of confusion and terror etched in her face as she desperately grasped for even the smallest amount of air. Katie threw her arms and kicked her feet in a failed attempt to force me to release my grip. Shh, it's okay. I love you, I whispered. I watched those beautiful brown eyes as they moved to the back of her head. I then felt myself holding the weight of her body as her legs gave out. I walked her across the room and laid her down on the bed. There was no longer gasping or fighting, just silence. I held her head close to my chest for most of that night. This was the first time that I'd really met myself, met the real me. I'm not sure how my parents knew who I was, or what they thought I was, but they obviously knew that something was going on inside of me. It could have been my drawings, or maybe it was just a parent's intuition. I may never know. Sometimes I think that maybe I should have at least asked them first. However, what I do know is that they tried to keep this part of me locked up, and they failed to do so. Eventually, they learned that you can't keep a person from becoming who they are destined to be. Katie was my first love, the first of many. The internet has made it rather easy for someone like myself. There will always be a girl out there willing to take a chance at finding true love, and one of those times, it may just lead her to it. Lead her to me.